Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here on a given Tuesday at the 4 to 5 block, ThinkTech Global, with Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky. He's the rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii, which is fair to say an Orthodox sect of Judaism.
You could call us that, yeah, with a emphasis on outreach to all Jews.
Okay, I do know that. And today we're talking about the Jewish perspective, and I think it's important that people understand the Jewish perspective. There are so many things happening these days in the world. The world is such a small place these days, it seems like. There's activity, sometimes really sad activity in the Middle East and in Europe and in this country that we ought to cover to get what I would call, what the rabbi has called the Jewish perspective. So, Rabbi, the first thing is, what is Chabad of Hawaii? Can you talk about that?
Sure. Chabad of Hawaii is a Jewish organization. It's the largest Jewish outreach organization in the world today, and it was inspired by the Hasidic movement. It's a Hasidic group. That's the branch of Judaism that's steeped in Jewish mysticism. The founder 300 years ago was a saintly leader by the name of the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name. And he revolutionized Judaism by bringing a depth and enthusiasm and passion to the teachings of Judaism and to the ways of Judaism, which inspired countless of Jews to embrace Judaism and to live inspired lives. And in our generation, led by the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, passed away 22 years ago.
Very famous man.
Right. He was a very inspired leader, and he taught not only to his community and to the Jewish people, but the message of Judaism to the world. And it was a very uplifting and positive message. And the message, if one can, condense it, is that that innately man is good, not naturally. By nature, if we don't work on ourselves, then the other side takes over. But at the very core, we all have a spark of God within us. And if we work on ourselves, then we're able to have this dimension of our being be our guiding light, and we can be sources of light, firstly in our own lives, in our families, in our communities, and to the world. And the prophets refer to the Jewish people as light unto the nations, that we carry a message. And it's a message of light, it's a message of love, and it's a message of purpose, meaning, and that's really what Judaism is all about.
So you said that Chabad is involved in outreach. How does that work? What steps do you take?
Well, the Rebbe inaugurated and established Chabad houses, that's how they're called, Chabad centers, literally all across the world. Practically in almost every city in this country, in every city all across the globe, you have Chabad rabbis and Chabad centers welcoming Jews and reaching out to the Jewish community as well as to the community at large in many instances, with this message of the teachings of Judaism, and it's basically a positive message of love and acceptance.
So I can go to any one of those houses,
yes,
in any city, and exactly. I can pray with
yes.
the others there.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And what about being a rabbi in Chabad? How has it been for you? What has your training been? And how was your experience in Hawaii?
Well, as we all know, Hawaii is a beautiful place. It's been a great experience for us. We've been here, myself and my wife. We've been here for the last 26 years. We've come out here 26 years ago. And over that time, we've, thank God, been able to establish our center and reach out to many, many Jews, both those who live here, as well as those who travel here and the tourists. And today we have Chabad centers on all the islands, Maui, Kauai, and the Big Island as well. So wherever the Jews are, that's where we are, and we try to bring the message of Judaism and the practice of Judaism. And just this week is as we just spoke, is the Jewish holiday of Passover, which began Friday night. And the holiday of Passover is celebrated with a Seder. The first night we have a Seder, which is a Passover meal. So we had 5 public community Seders throughout all the islands.
Where anybody can go.
Yes. In our Seder here in Honolulu, we had about 250 people.
That's
and
impressive.
Passover also ties in to this because Passover is the message of freedom. It's the holiday that commemorates our freedom from slavery from Egypt. And freedom is really at the heart of what we want to talk about today, and freedom and its threat. But like everything in Judaism, what happens in the world at large is really a consequence of what's going on in the minds and hearts of the people. And when people are able to experience personal freedom, freedom from being enslaved and to follow habits or destructive ways, able to rise above this pull and experience inner freedom to do and to live life fully, then collectively, if enough people do that, then collectively we have a transformed society.
Yes, still working on that.
Yes.
You know, I went to a Seder on Friday night, of course, and went through the Haggadah yet again. It was all so familiar. It's like going to see an opera, you know, and you know you've seen it all before, but somehow it takes on new meaning every time you see it again.
Right.
And of course, in the Haggadah, that's common, that's popular. I'm not sure which one you used at your larger Seder, but
The Maxwell House Haggadah.
Oh, I don't know that one. Yeah, okay. Maxwell House, that goes way back. Yeah. There's, you know, a lot of references to the camps during the Second War, the Holocaust, the people involved, some of the quotable quotes from people who have been there or written about it. And it struck me, as it has in the past, but perhaps more this time, that the Seder and Passover is really a way to fully appreciate what happened during the war. Yes, it's freedom from Egypt, but it's also freedom from what happened from the incredible experience of the Holocaust. And I felt that it really connected me, perhaps more than before. Maybe it's because I've talked to survivors lately, and I was telling you about that. We've had Bernard often on this talk show. But I wonder if that's a commonly held view. People see Passover in the context beyond Egypt. They see it in the context of modern times.
Yes, and that's a very good point. As a matter of fact, there's a passage in the Haggadah that we say, and it basically reads that in every single generation, every person has to envision themselves as if they themselves are going out of Egypt. It's a personal journey. Egypt is the historical place where the story of Passover took place, but in the larger sense, we're talking about any oppression, both internal and external. But specifically the passage in the Haggadah where it says that in every single generation they rise up to an attempt to annihilate us, meaning the Jewish people, but for the grace of God who saves us from their hands. And if you look at Jewish history, which is a very long history, what's amazing is that history is always repeating itself in different forms and in different settings. But the antagonism and the anti-Semitism and the suffering that the Jewish people experienced in Egypt is something that runs through our history. And in the most recent colossal event is the Holocaust, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And the miracle of our survival. that even though that all of these attempts have been made to silence us and to annihilate us, none of them have been successful, and we're around today, talking here today, and we're a living people. Rome, is just a footnote in history today, and Greece and all the Babylon and all the great nations of the past, and the Jew and Judaism and the Jewish nation is immortal. It lives on.
But I had from something you said a minute ago, and also my experience in the Seder, also leads me to feel that when you talk about, emancipation, when you talk about freedom, you're talking about more than the Jewish people.
True.
It's a concept that
True.
runs deep
True.
for the Jewish people, but
True.
the Jewish people apply it everywhere in every context. Am I right?
True, exactly. As a matter of fact, that Moses, who's the chief architect in the story of Passover, who led the Jewish people out of Egypt, has been the inspiration for many, many revolutions for peace all throughout history, even recent history. And in that respect, it all goes back to the biblical story of our exodus of Egypt.
I want to take a short break, Rabbi, and then come back, and I want to talk about current events, in the Middle East, events involving Iran, events involving the deal that we recently made with Iran. Well, I'm not sure it's finished yet,
Right.
but the potential deal that we made with Iran, and get the Jewish perspective on that from your point of view. That's Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky. He's the rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii. We're here on ThinkTech Global talking about the Jewish perspective on some very international issues. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on the ThinkTech Digital Series. The show is every Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and I want you to watch this show because I think that when we talk with artists on the show about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, why they do it, I believe that it resonates within each of us, and we find something inside of ourselves that brings us closer to all of humanity. That's what arts are there to do, and that's what I'm here to do on this show. That's Center Stage. It's on every Wednesday from 2 to 3 o'clock. I hope to see you there.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I host a show called Healthcare in Hawaii here on ThinkTech. We get together once a week or sometimes twice a month. Depends when we're busy. We get together less often, but we love to see you here to talk about the preeminent healthcare issues in our state. Our programs vary very widely. We talk about economics, we talk about healthcare, we talk about social issues on this program. Thanks for joining us.
We're back, we're live, we're here with Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky, the rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii, to learn about the Jewish perspective on things global. And I guess the biggest thing in the news lately, still very hot, is the deal, the putative deal between the U.S. and Iran over nuclear weapons. And I mean, there have been so many positions expressed. Israel itself, we know from the newspapers, is fragmented over this. Netanyahu almost lost his job over it. But the deal was made tentatively, and in June it's supposed to be finalized, and it's supposed to slow down the development of nuclear weapons in Iran, at the same time lift the sanctions. It's a complex deal. It wasn't easy to negotiate. I have my thoughts about it, but I'm wondering about the Jewish perspective about that deal.
Okay, I'll for sure be able to tell you my perspective, my understanding. I draw from Jewish sources and exposure to different Jewish people's opinions. So I'll just begin with interesting ruling law in Jewish law. Every Sabbath in the synagogue, we read from a Torah scroll. And we read from the Old Testament it's called a Torah scroll. And the Torah scroll is written in Hebrew. It's written on parchment with ink, and the letters are written in such a way. Now, the ruling is that what happens if a letter gets broken or chipped off, that invalidates the Torah scroll and you can no longer read from it. You have to fix that letter. What happens if you look at a letter and it's not clear whether it's ruined or it's totally broken? Are you allowed to continue reading from the Torah scroll? So the ruling is that you bring a young child, a 5-year-old child, who doesn't know any complexities about anything, and you ask the child to look at this letter. If the child is able to recognize the letter for what it is, then that's a kosher letter. If the child is not able to recognize the letter, then that invalidates the letter and invalidates the Torah scroll. So I think when it comes to a complex question like this, I think we have to just ask a child and ask him that here you have a nation that forever has been espousing their aim to annihilate Israel, to wipe it off from the face of the earth, and now their effort in obtaining these nuclear weapons that would enable them to do it. They haven't changed their tune, their motto. They still say that this is their aim. I think it's a colossal mistake to allow for them to obtain nuclear weapons. Speaking now as a Jew and from Israel's perspective, for Israel's survival and existence. But we all know that it's not just Israel that is in danger with a nuclear Iran, but the entire Middle East, and also the great Satan is not out of their crosshairs. So, we've learned a long time ago from the Holocaust that we have to believe, these people when they say that they want to kill and murder and destroy, and we have to take them for their word, and we have to protect ourselves and not allow for them to do it. So I think that by caving into, to the pressure, President Obama is a historical tragedy mistake. And I think what Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is advocating is something that's commonsensical. And for sure, for Israel, there's certain things that you can't gamble with. You cannot gamble with your very survival, and you cannot make assumptions that everyone knows are not real and can easily be take a turn in the opposite direction very quickly. So I think it's suicidal for the West to allow for Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. I mean, even the discussion, the words that we heard from what I heard, the snippet of Obama's interview, I think it was yesterday or earlier in the week, that we cannot expect for them to change. So for them to change and cease to be this evil nation that they are, if that's off the table, then how can you allow for them to obtain the nuclear weapons? I mean, it's just so illogical.
Yeah. It's very interesting that somebody in the Iran military, yesterday was it, repeated that old statement that has been made by the Iran government for quite some time.
Since 1979.
Yeah, since the Shah left.
Right.
That they wanted to destroy Israel. Still today, even in the crucible of this agreement, knowing that it would jeopardize the agreement, or could jeopardize the agreement if they said such words. They said again that they wanted to annihilate Israel.
And I think that's, it's God's way of trying to wake us up and realize that we're not dealing with a changed government or a changed regime. They still have their agenda. And everybody knows, you step back, you know that Iran doesn't need nuclear facilities
For energy. Has
right?
tons of oil.
Tons of oil. So what else do they need it for?
Yeah.
And then this nuclear race that's inevitably happening or going to happen as a result of that. I mean, it's going to be a big mess.
Or worse.
Or worse.
The other thing was there was and Benjamin Netanyahu said, and I think his cabinet joined him in this, said in response to that comment that they wanted the ultimate deal to include a provision recognizing the existence of Israel.
Right, which they're refusing.
Which the Iranians immediately refused. Now you'd think if they were looking for a solution to, a problem there, trying to have a denouement, diplomatically, a new policy, demonstrate a new approach, they would have agreed to that, because it really doesn't hurt them to agree to that. And yet still the same rancor prevailed. Scary, actually.
Very scary.
The other thing is, a couple of days ago, there was an article in the Washington Times here in this country making a strong comparison between this deal and the appeasement policy of Chamberlain back in the 30s that led to Hitler's war.
Right.
And I wonder, how you feel about that. Is that a valid comparison, Rabbi?
It seems to me it's valid. I don't understand, frankly, why the president feels compelled to cave in to their demands. I don't see what America benefits from it, what the world benefits from it, even if it's not probable that they would, even if you believe, and I don't, but let's say you believe that it's not probable for them to use these nuclear know-how that they have for a nuclear bomb, but if it's possible, why give them that possibility? Why give them that chance when there are definitely elements in the country there that are fighting to be able to nuke Israel or their other enemies there in the Middle East? So it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Now, people say, in defense of the deal,
Yeah.
they say that, no, this is a new Iran, and that if you look at the generation coming up, it's not the Ahmadinejad, I can't pronounce that, generation. It's another generation, and they're better educated, they're more global. And they wouldn't do this, and they may not be in power yet, but there will come a time in the maybe not too distant future where the whole country will come forward as a modern, global community. And therefore, for that reason, we should give them more credit than we would give them if we judged them only on their statements of an intention to annihilate Israel before. Where does that fit for you?
Well, to me, I think it's wishful thinking, but it more than that, it betrays. It betrays. Anyone who can say that can say that only because the threat from Iran is not to them, and it's not real and immediate. But for Israel, where this threat is a real and immediate threat, to speculate that a new generation will take over one day, and it's going to be a different kind of country. You're playing with fire. What happens if you're wrong? For Israel, if you're wrong, it can, God forbid, mean the destruction of Israel. So how can Israel even entertain all these speculation? Right now, there is a government in place that is entrenched in their hatred towards Zionism and towards Jews, and they shout it from the rooftops. So Israel cannot allow for them to become a nuclear power.
Well, we're going to see some process now between now the month of April and the month of June. It'll probably be in the paper many times. There are many people who want to see this deal go through in the way either of appeasement or some sort of practical diplomatic approach. We'd rather avoid a confrontation than have one, sort of thing, without considering what you're talking about.
I just want to say one thing,
Yeah.
Jay, that I remember many years ago, I had a conversation with the late Senator Dan Inouye, who, as you know, was a great senator and a great friend of Israel. And he was perhaps one of the strongest advocates for Israel in the Senate. Definitely he was overseeing, you know, the very powerful committees that Israel needed to work with. He once said to me something very fascinating. He said to me that you have to remember that while America is Israel's best friend, this is pre-Obama days, while America is Israel's best friend, Israel cannot rely on America for its survival. Because America has its interests, and they don't always align with Israel. So for Israel to outsource its security to America because of this friendship that there exists between America and Israel is wrong and a big mistake. And how true those words ring today.
Yeah, and maybe more as we go forward.
More as we go forward.
So, you know, it's not clear to me what the Hawaii delegation is going to do on this. And I wonder if you'd take a moment to explain your thoughts from the Jewish perspective about what the delegation should be doing when this comes up for a vote in Congress.
Well, I know that Senator Brian Schatz isn't supportive of this deal. Personally, I try to reach out to him and ask him to reconsider and to rethink in light of all of the danger in allowing Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. I haven't heard back from him, so I don't know. I don't think he's changed his posture or mind yet. But I would say to the delegation that what's good for the Jews is good for America. That it's not just a Jewish issue just for Israel, but we're talking about peace and stability in the entire region. And Israel, being that they're so close to the situation and they're so affected by this, is not just warmongering, but it's doing what it's doing in fear of its survival. And by allowing Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, there is this great danger that, you know, that there'll be massive destruction, not just in the Middle East, but in all over the world.
Yeah, because a bomb in one place, not only would it destroy a given country, but it would have a huge effect. I mean, Chernobyl, which was just a meltdown, not even a bomb, is having effect all these decades later.
Yes.
There's a lot of sick people in that part of Russia.
For sure.
It would wreck the world, is
sure.
what would happen.
For sure. Now, just to mention that, you know, Netanyahu's efforts to try to stop Iran from obtaining these nuclear capabilities is really based on, I think, teaching in the Torah, in Judaism. And that is that the passage of our sages where it says that the world exists on, in Hebrew, it's al-hadin v'ha'emes v'ha'sholem, on justice, truth, and peace. You cannot have peace without justice and truth. You cannot overlook and overpaper the injustice for the sake of obtaining peace. If it's not based on justice and truth, if the parties are not truly, genuinely interested in making peace and living in peace, and there isn't justice, then peace will never be attained. And this is the quagmire that Israel finds itself, that everyone is saying Israel is not a partner for peace, it's not willing to concede this and concede that. And that is that peace can only be based on justice, on the willingness of the parties to make peace. If there isn't that willingness there, there'll never be peace.
Otherwise, it's the emperor's new clothes.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
You have to have a principled peace. That's Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky, a rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii, here on ThinkTech Global, discussing the Jewish perspective on some of the events in this world today. I'm Jay Fidell. We'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, Yappers. This is your host, Kingsley, for the Yap Show. Every Friday, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch us here live, ThinkTech Hawaii, and then later on, we upload to our YouTube channel. We talk about youth issues, policies, youth programs, and how to transition yourself into adulthood.
But this was like a sign, I guess. Hey, life's like, hey,
Right.
now's your chance to go back to school, which I'm doing.
Catch us here again live, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Okay, we're back, we're live. We're here with Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky, the rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii. And we're talking about the Jewish perspective on some global issues here on ThinkTech Global. So one obviously disturbing development in the past, year, I guess, is ISIS. ISIS is brutal, murderous. And people have, I think they've said it, they're trying to get back as fast as they can to the 2nd century. We strip off all those years of progress and development of science and learning, education. Let's get back to the 2nd century and behead people for no reason at all. And it apparently has some traction. There are kids leaving Northern Europe, leaving this country to go and be with them and help them out in their mission to get back to the 2nd century. This is I guess, you could even say that when we went into Iraq to look for non-existent weapons of mass destruction back when in the early 2000s, we destabilized things, and now we are haunted by that destabilization. But ISIS is a real threat. Whether it wins a given city or battle today or tomorrow, it's a threat because it shows you how the boundaries have dissolved. Not only geographical boundaries, but moral boundaries, they have dissolved. From the Jewish perspective, what is going on, and what should we think about this? What should we do about this?
Okay, I think that what's happening here is a clash of not only two cultures, but a clash of different systems of belief. The Western world, which is primarily a Judeo-Christian society, which draws its roots from the Bible, is a society that whose values are life. It's a society, as Judaism and Christianity. I know from Judaism, it's a teaching that embraces life, that respects life, that does everything with the aim of enhancing life and perfecting life. As opposed to the terrorists, whether it's ISIS or whether it's Al-Qaeda or whether it's just all the terrorists, the Palestinian terrorists, they have a whole different way of looking at life and in the world. They don't have this, this value of life. For them, jihad and murder and killing, that's the highest. That's the highest that they seek to go to. So it's really a clash between good and evil, and it's very important for us to recognize that this is a battle between good and evil. I know it's very popular today in our country, probably in the Western world in general, you know, this relative morality. Everything is relative. It may be right for you, but it doesn't mean that it's right, because for someone else, you know, it may not be right. And when you start looking at the world in such a way, then that opens up the door for terrible, it opens up the door to what we see today. When the West fought the Nazis, we won because we knew that they were evil and we had good on our side. And this is what motivated us to fight, and this is what enabled us to win. As long as we don't recognize that there is good and evil seeks to destroy good, so good has to destroy evil, we'll never destroy evil. And within Judaism, all of history is the attempt and the purpose of the vanquishing good over evil.
That's very important, you know, and I think in many ways our world has become so complex we may have lost sight of that. But going a step further on the same notion, though, Rabbi, you know, we've seen Charlie Hebdo, we've seen a recurrence, a reemergence of a pretty nasty brand of anti-Semitism, a murderous brand of anti-Semitism in Europe. This is of great concern it should be a great concern to everybody, but it is certainly a great concern to a lot of Jewish people, because you know, it's irrational, but it is reminiscent of what happened in the 30s. How do we think about that? What can we do about that? Why is this happening yet again? Why is this happening?
Well, you know, if you're a student of history, you'll know that anti-Semitism is not a new phenomena. Anti-Semitism began with Egypt, our ancestors in Egypt. Even before that, Abraham, the first Jew, was called Avraham Ha'ivri, the Hebrew, because Ha'ivri in Hebrew means on the other side. The whole world was on one side, and he was on the other side. Anti-Semitism is something that really defies reason. It's not logical. It's not reasonable. If you study anti-Semitism throughout history, you'll see that it took on many forms. Jews were hated for religious reasons because they were blamed to have killed Christ. Jews were hated in
It was the Romans that did that, by the way. I just want to be
yeah,
clear.
yeah, right, exactly.
Nothing to do with
right.
it. You know?
True. In atheistic societies like communism, Jews were hated. In the capitalist societies, Jews were persecuted and hated because they were part of the communism. In communist societies, it's because they were capitalists. In religious societies, because of deicide. It's not, you know, it's either we were too rich and powerful, or too poor and menace. So it's really a phenomena that cannot be explained. It's just one of those things. But the larger question is, why is it so? And how did that play into our survival as a people? On the face of it, anti-Semitism is what jeopardized our survival in every society and culture in which it reared its head. On the other hand, it reminds us that we're Jewish. It's very pitiful if the Jewish people's only reminder that they're Jewish is coming from the hatred of anti-Semitism rather than the beauty of being Jewish and being connected to God in a special way, which Judaism is all about, and carrying this special message into the world. So I don't think we'll ever eradicate anti-Semitism. For a long time after the Holocaust, the world felt very guilty over what happened to the Jews. So anti-Semitism was not in vogue in Europe, surely not in the United States. And thank God here, in large part, it's still not in vogue. We can't say that about Europe, where it's in full rage, France and other parts of Europe. So what's interesting is that the big picture in Judaism is this colossal war between good and evil. And Judaism believes that there will come a day when the Messiah will come, that good will vanquish evil, and the world will be rid of all of its destructive behaviors, including anti-Semitism. What we need to do until then is to protect ourselves from them, not to bury our heads in the sand, but we need to protect ourselves. And also for the Jewish people, it involves also a spiritual connection to Judaism, so that we are not, our image of ourselves is not how other people perceive us, but our image of ourselves is a very healthy and positive image that we get by studying the Judaism and studying the Torah and by embracing its values.
Hawaii is a special place,
True.
A place of great diversity, maybe the most admired collection of diverse groups in the world, all of which live together in peace and tolerance. We know a lot about tolerance in Hawaii. And as part of that, there's really virtually no anti-Semitism here, nothing to speak of anyway, and it's a good thing.
Great thing.
But you worry that, that there could be people who feel that way and act out in some way. And I wonder if you could address, Hawaii, Rabbi, and tell them how they should be feeling when they notice that anti-Semitism exists elsewhere.
Well, first of all, Jay, I just want to second what you're saying, because having lived here for 26 years, it is remarkable that there's no trace of anti-Semitism in our community, in our society and culture here, which is a blessing. Part of the aloha spirit, I guess, to embrace and accept the diverse people that live here. I'm from New York originally, and friends of mine who live here, also from New York, have commented to me that it's amazing that only Honolulu and New York are similar because they're melting pots in the way that they are. But anti-Semitism, the danger of anti-Semitism, even though it affects Jewish people and not the community at large, but ultimately it affects the community at large. If this hatred, the senseless hatred, is allowed to rear its head, eventually it doesn't stop with the Jewish people, but it finds other people in the community or other segments of the community that eventually suffer from this. I forget who said it, but some philosopher in the last 100 years said that at first they came for the Jews.
Oh, sure.
But I'm not Jewish, so I didn't pay attention. And then they came you know, I don't know.
For this group and that group.
You know, I
And
didn't
finally,
feel
they came for me.
yeah, there was
and
no one left to.
there was nobody left to help me.
Yeah, right.
Rabbi Itchel Krasnjansky, Rabbi of Chabad of Hawaii, helping us understand from the Jewish perspective some of the world events these days here on ThinkTech Global. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Aloha, shalom.
Shalom. Thank you. Thank you. Are we over?